Hi there, this is Emma from Brushstrokes Tustin. Thank you so much for purchasing one of our paint kits. This one is for our Hogwarts castle. Very, very fun. Before we get started, this is acrylic paint, so make sure that you've got on some clothes that you don't mind maybe getting some paint on. You've got on an apron if you have one, and I have all my paints scraped out onto a plate. And I've got my brushes and also a water cup because we will be rinsing our brushes out as we go. So you want to make sure that you've got a water cup as well. So with that, we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to get started on my sky. I'm going to take my biggest brush. I'm going to start in my right corner and work to my left. I'm going to start with mostly blue and a little bit of black on my brush. And I'm actually going to start by swirling around in circles. Swirl, swirl, swirl around my canvas. And it's going to create different layers and textures of blue. So I'm going to keep adding more paint to my brush. Swirling around. And I don't want to do it too thick because I want to be able to paint over it in a little bit. So a bunch of little circles, so if you can tell it's just this motion. Swirl, swirl, swirl in that upper corner. And I'm going to fill most of my canvas, but if I want to mark off where I don't want to go, I can go a little bit lower than halfway up my canvas, and I can make a line, do a straight line across, and then a diagonal down. So a little bit lower than halfway down our canvas, we can do a straight line down, and this is going to be our rocks. And then we can do a diagonal line down. We still have some space down here and some space down here for our water. So that's gonna be our cliffs, and I can do everything else above this line. Actually, our water's probably gonna end right there. So I can do everything else above this line. I'm just swirling, swirling, swirling around my canvas. If I wanna go back and add some solid black, right in this top corner, swirl, swirl, swirl around, and blend it into the darker. We just want a lot of different shades of blue and black throughout our sky. So I can get more blue and black, starting to spread out, and I'm mixing back into that solid black, swishing around. It's like I've got a magical wand or something. And we're casting spells. Now, I can't say I remember any spells from Harry Potter. I feel like one of them has Leviosa in it. I don't know for sure, but that's what's coming to my head. It's Wingardium Leviosa. Who knows? I cannot remember right now. But I'm just doing this whole side of the canvas, blue and a little bit of black, and I'm working my way over here, swirling my brush around. Let's see, have I gotten and out of the frame. So I'm going to, with this blue and black, I'm going to skip this middle part, and I'm actually going to go directly to this side and do some dark blue and black over here. So you want kind of like a middle part that is a little bit lighter. So I'm going to make sure that I have blue and black kind of all throughout here, and then it's going to get slightly darker. So again, I have it a little bit higher than my triangle ending. Blue and black, swirling down here. And then it's going to get lighter in this kind of area. So if I've got a ton of black on my brush, I can wipe it off. And now I can do mostly blue and white. So I can go right in this area. And then I can blend out into, so I'm actually overlapping, smearing it around on my canvas, taking some of that blue and white and overlapping it into my darker areas as well. So I'm actually mixing right on my canvas. Instead of mixing on my palette, I'm mixing this paint right on my canvas. Blue and white, just swirl it around so it starts to look natural. Again, I'm swirling it into the blue and black. If I need to add more blue and black, I certainly can. I just want to swirl everything together so you don't see any harsh lines. We don't want any harsh lines in this. Swirl it all around. My hand's getting tired. This is a workout. A little quarantine workout. Love it. Okay, I'm almost done with my blue and white. Swirling it down into these areas. And then you can see I'm mixing it in. And I also like to paint the edges of my canvas. So I'm actually going to paint the physical sides of my canvas and the top of my canvas as well. Alrighty, so now I've got some misty funkiness going on, and the more you do this, twist your brush around, the more it's really going to blend together and look really, really natural. So go ahead and do that. While this is drying a little bit, I'm going to throw in my grays down here. So I can wipe my brush off if I've got a lot of blue, or you can rinse it off in your water. And I'm going to get some white and a little bit of black, and that will create some gray. White and a little bit of black to create a medium gray, and then I'll just fill my whole, I don't want to call it a triangle, but this whole shape in. Fill it on and all the way. I might go even a little bit lower. This one looks like it's a little bit steeper. It's not going to be exactly right. No two paintings are the same. Okay, so it's pretty much all filled in. Now, while this is wet, I want to add a little bit of dimension. So I can get a little bit of black on my brush and mix it into whatever color I was working with to make a darker gray. So it's a little bit darker, and I can just go throughout and start to add some squiggly lines. Oh, and I definitely want to make sure, I don't really know what this is, but it looks like a little V down here, which is where we're going to be adding those yellow lines. Now I feel like I just have to get it off my chest. I personally support and respect Harry Potter. I have not watched all the movies or read all the books. I have definitely watched some of them. I've been on the ride at Universal Studios, but I'm not a Harry Potter expert. So if you can tell, I don't really know what I'm talking about. So I know this is how it works, but I don't know all the exact terms, and I apologize for that. But I do love Harry Potter fans. I've never met a Harry Potter fan that I didn't like, actually, quite frankly. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of smearing it around, because we're painting a rock, and rocks have dimension. So I'm just adding a little bit of gray all throughout. I'm just tapping my brush, smearing it all around, and that's creating some shadow look so it's not so one-dimensional. Again, make sure you include that V so we can add those yellow streaks later, so you remember where that is. Now, while that's drying, I can wipe or rinse off my brush, and I can get ready to add my purple lagoon. So I can take red and blue, mix those together, and add some white, and get a nice light purple, and fill in the rest of the space on my canvas. Now, I forgot to paint my sides gray right here, but if you want to, you can paint your sides gray, and then you can also paint your bottom gray as well. And I don't think I said this, but you can just, do this painting right on your tabletop. Just make sure you cover up your table with some paper, something to protect the surface, because this is acrylic paint, but you don't need an easel to do this painting. Okay, so I've got all of these spaces filled in. Now, something that I did to make it look a little bit more foggy is I took a little bit more white and I mixed it into my purple, and I actually added it along this bottom area. And then what I did, and if you're a kid and you're doing this, make sure you ask for parental permission. I actually took my finger and I used that to smear that lighter purple in to create some fog. So I added a little bit of white to my purple, and I'm just smearing up in between the rock and my water. And as you do this, I can get a little bit more on my brush. Do some parts that are higher, it kind of looks like fog, and it works a lot better with your finger, so I do recommend doing it with your finger. Smear that all in, wipe my brush, or not my brush, my finger off, and there you have it. We have a background. Looks like I forgot a little bit of sky over here. Okay, wonderful. So now this is mostly dry. Let's add a moon. I'm gonna rinse and dry my brush off, or just wipe it off. And I'm going to get mostly white and a tiny bit of gray for my moon. So I'm just gonna do it in this top up left corner. I'm gonna swirl my brush around. And that is going to create a moon. I had to get it as circular as possible, but we're going to cover it with clouds, so if it's not perfect, no one will know. And actually, I can tell now that I'm looking a little bit more to the front. Mine's not very perfect at all, so I'm going to try to fix that. When I paint from the side, everything ends up tilted, so probably all of these buildings will be slightly tilted. So make sure you're standing right in front of your canvas looking at it so painting doesn't turn out wonky like mine. Just might. So I want to add a little bit of texture to my moon. I can grab some darker gray. So here was the light gray for my moon. I can grab some darker gray, and I can actually tap a little bit of that gray onto my canvas because moons tend to have some texture. So that's going to create a little bit of texture for the moon. I could also do that in solid white, some solid white on my brush. You can tap a little bit of that on there. That's going to create some lighter texture for my moon. So now our moon's a little bit more interesting. Now, clouds, in my opinion, are always optional. They're a little bit tricky. Let me show you how to do them. You can decide if you want to do them. I like to do my paintings on butcher paper, so I like to practice anything that I'm not sure about on butcher paper or a piece of paper before I put it on my canvas, just so if I mess it up a little bit, I don't regret it. So I'm going to show you how to do those clouds though. If you do it right, it's not too difficult. So I'm going to wipe my brush off and get a light gray or white, a similar color as the moon. And these clouds, I always like to have them have flat bottoms, and then it's almost like a triangle for the top, a really flat, long triangle. So I'm going to leave a little bit of the bottom of my moon right there, and then I can start doing little U shapes, upside down U shapes, or even like I'm circling my brush again, but I like to consider them upside down U shapes. And I'm going to fill that whole thing in with little tiny U shapes. So it's flat across, and then we've got a bunch of U shapes. And you'll probably be able to see it better with this one. So it's like a little half circle, a little upside down U shape, and then I'll do another one, and I'll just overlap them. And then the bottom, you want it flat. Okay, so let's do one more tiny one, little U shape, little half circle. I'm going to do one underneath. And then that bottom is flat. Totally optional. It's just a triangle with some half circles on top, but I do know with experience in the studio, people tend to struggle with these. So we're going to add maybe some highlights on them later, but for now we're just going to leave them be and start working on our castle or school. Yes. So I'm going to take some white, get some black. Oh my goodness, this is why we don't hold our canvases up, because it all smears together, not our canvases, our palettes up. So I can get some gray, which is just white and black. Mix, mix, mix on my palette, and I can start making some shapes for Hogwarts. So I want to start with a rectangle on the side closest to the edge. I'm going to do these very, very thin because I want to be able to do my thin in paint because I want to be able to do my lights later. And again, when I do not do it from the front, everything turns out a little wobbly. That's okay. So I've got a rectangle. That's my first step right here. There's still plenty of space over here. Now with that rectangle, and if you want to, if you're a little bit intimidated by doing all these shapes freehand, you can switch to your smallest brush and just kind of plan them out with your smallest brush. So I can do a diagonal inward. So I'm going to start at the top corner, the very outside top left corner. I'm going to do a diagonal to the right, and then over, and then I'm going to do a diagonal down. And you can fill that in. But I'm probably just going to do all of my shapes first. Then I'm going to do 2 lines at the top of this. Let me try to get it a little bit over. 2 lines at the top of that to create a little rectangle coming out of the top of our house over to the right of it. I'm probably going to say house and castle and other stuff on accident, so I apologize in advance for not referring to this as a school. I always forget. So once I have that little rectangle, I want to extend those lines out because the cone on top is going to be longer. And let me maybe get this a little bit lighter so you can really see it. Once I have that, I do want to make my cone. So I'm just going to take my brush, I'm going to go up and back down. Now I know that's awful. I'm going to stand in front of the canvas and try to make it a little better. Make it really long and tall. And there we go, that's a little bit better. So I want it to be nice and long, going really high up into the sky, because that's our tallest part. Of course, we're gonna fill that in. I'm going to do another square right to the side of it. That's going to be another part of the building. And that square is gonna have a triangle on it as well. Let's do another taller square to the right of it. Now, I made all of these up. This is not accurate. Legally, this is not referencing anything at all. Hog who? We'll just, just a building. So I have my square, my rectangle. I'm gonna do another tiny triangle on top of that. Let's do a really tall and skinny one right next to it. And then let's do a shorter guy with a little tall and skinny guy off the edge. So I've just pretty much got a bunch of squares. Of course, you can pause it in between all of those steps, but let me go over it one more time. I've got a regular rectangle. I've got 2 diagonal lines facing inward, connected by a line across. I've got 2 lines going up, creating another little rectangle, and then a bigger triangle on top of it. I've got a little square down here with a little triangle kind of on the right side of it. I've got a longer rectangle over here, a little bit shorter and a little bit taller, with another triangle on top. Oh my goodness, and I forgot my triangle over here. Let's add another triangle on top of that guy. So I've got 4 triangles, and then I've got something that's kind of going off the side. I'm going to switch back to my biggest brush, make sure I dry it off, and I'm going to start to fill those in. Again, that was red and white. No, where did that come from? White and black to make gray, and I'm just going to fill that in. Fill that on in all those shapes. Now, for those tiny ones, if you want to use your smallest brush, go for it. You absolutely can. I might add a little bit more black, actually. Obviously, most of my black is covered up, but I'm going to try to add a little bit more black to make it slightly darker. I want it to be a little bit more ominous. Okay, this. Check. Looking good. So I'm just filling all of these shapes in. They're all going to kind of blend together. That's all right. Okay, it's going to kind of go off the edge. Okay, we've got our outline. I might make this guy a little bit darker down here. That triangle, so remember that little triangle? Whoever she is, nobody knows. And now we can start adding highlights, shadows, and then we will add our yellow. So I'm gonna take my smallest brush, dry it off, and I'm gonna start adding some shadows. So I'm gonna get some solid black. And if our moon is on this side, the highlights are all gonna be on the left side and the shadows are all gonna be on the right side because the moon is casting light and then casting shadows on our left side. So I wanna make sure on our right side, on our right side. So all of my right sides, I am going to take a little bit of black, try to cover my right sides and my bottoms of things. So all the bottoms of the triangles, add a little bit of black, and all the right sides of my triangles and rectangles will add a little bit of black. Kind of outlining, maybe I'll add a little bit along the bottom. So it was all the right side and the bottom of each of my separate shapes. So if this is a shape, it's gonna have the right side, bottom. All of my squares and rectangles all have a right side and bottom. Now we're gonna rinse our brush off and we're gonna do the exact opposite in white. We're gonna do left side top in solid white. So I'm gonna do kind of top, left side, top, put down my left side, the top of that square, left side, top. Hello. That light has been out for as long as I can remember. Let there be light. Lovely. Okay. Left side, top. Awesome. So now we have some highlights. So ideally, our paint is going to hopefully be drying soon, but while we're still waiting for it, let's add some highlights in our rocks and in our moon. So I'm still working with white paint, and I can start to add some highlights in my rocks. So I can imagine the lights hitting the rocks. I'm very lightly going along some of what I think might be the top sides of the rocks. You can tell there's not really a rhyme or reason. And if you're scared to mess this up, you can always use like a really light gray. I like to use my finger sometimes to smudge. But you can imagine there's light being cast, so these rocks have shapes. So pretty much it had 3 squiggly lines going down the diagonal. So that's really all it is 3 squiggly lines going down the diagonal. And I can take a little bit of white as well, and I can go back and forth in the water here very lightly. And that could be a reflection of my moon. So I have a bunch of shininess over there for my moon. Now, if I want to go back and add some more pops of color to my moon and my clouds, I can just very carefully go along the outside edge of my moon and smear a little bit of white paint onto the outside edge of my moon. Be very careful. Don't mess it all up like me. Kind of smearing that little bit of white paint along the outside edge. And then along the tops of my clouds is a great place to do some really bright white pops. So I'm still using solid white and my smallest brush, but I can just kind of recreate those curves. So my U shapes, even that bright white. And that's really gonna make our clouds pop, and they're just upside down U shapes. I can add a few that are a little bit lower than the very tops. So that makes everything pop a little bit more. It's on a straight line. So now let's add some yellow. I believe this is dry. This guy, I think we're still waiting on a little bit. So let's rinse our brush off. And of course you can pause this at any point. I know I'm going quickly, but feel free to pause it, rewind it, all of those fun things. You know how to do those. So I am going to take white and yellow with my smallest brush. White and yellow with my smallest brush. Wow, that looks magical, if anything's magical. I'm gonna take white and yellow, mix those two together, and I think this area is probably dry, so I can make those little lines from top to bottom. This is a bridge, that's what my guess is. With my yellow, those little lines in that V shape. There's also a super secret path that goes down from this top right corner of our rock down, kind of following that V. So I can just squiggle my brush back and forth, trying to squiggle it back and forth all the way down. And have it fade off very lightly. Kind of a path. Now, if we've got really bright yellow windows, theoretically they would be reflecting light on our rock. So we can go back to our rock and we can kind of follow anywhere that there's a little bit of white. We can add a tiny bit of yellow as well, because it would be, theoretically, the yellow windows would be reflecting on our rock. So this is just yellow and white. So I'm gonna hope that this is dry. We'll see. I think some of these guys are more dry, so I'm gonna start on this side and work my way. Again, these windows are not precise. They're not exact. They're not specific. So I'm just trying to make them cohesive in each block. So all the windows are going to be the same in this block, all of it going to be the same in each rectangle or square. So I can start by creating some rectangles. I'm just going to do 4 rectangles in my furthest over square. Now for this tall guy, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 little taps of my brush, and I'm going to do that 3 times. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So these are some spread out windows. So I've got these 4 down here, which are long rectangles, and I'm just pressing and pulling my brush. And then I have lines of 3 going across there. Now I'm going to switch back to my long rectangles, however many I can fit across. I can fit across 3 in this one. I don't think I can do more than 3 rows. So I'm just going to stick with 3 rows. However many fit in your painting. All of our paintings are going to be totally different. So now I can switch back to the really small windows. So I can just tap my brush across. And again, I'm doing this diagonally, so if these are not in straight lines, don't laugh at me, please. I'm guessing they aren't. Let's all just be nice here. So I'm just trying to tap those across. Now in the sample, I have a little bit of a doorway, so if I want to create a little door somewhere at the bottom, it's going to be an arch filled in, an arch, the flat bottom. And again, I'm still using yellow and white. Oh, goodbye, light. It's nice having you. Wow, we got some magic up in here. I meant to do that. Okay, so now we're working our way over. I think this was kind of wet, but I'm going to try it out. We're going to do really long rectangles and 2 rows of them. So I'm going to start up at the top, just kind of dragging and pulling my brush. Again, everything's kind of diagonal when I paint from the side. That's okay. And I'll do another row of really long brush strokes. Now, this is kind of getting muddled, right? Because my paint's still wet, but once it's dry, if you want to go over and do another coat, it really, really makes it pop. So I've got those. Now I'm going to only have a tiny bit of paint on my brush, and I'm going to try to get as many tiny little windows on this tower as I can. And all the samples I looked at had windows going up the tower. No, samples. The few that I looked So I'm just gonna go diagonally up. If this is, if you're a Harry Potter fan, you know this is not correct. That's fine. Or if you're just a wizard fan, oops. So I'm just tapping up and diagonal, so I'm doing a line that follows those diagonals going up. So I'm gonna have kind of one in the middle that's going straight, and these guys are all gonna go diagonal. I mean, I'm good at this. These lights, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a light that's flickering on and off. It's spooky in here. Okay, so I can take just a little bit of this yellow, and I can also go along some of my corners of my shapes, just a tiny bit of yellow. And it's like the yellow light, doesn't really matter where. I'm trying to go anywhere there's a little bit of space. Adding a little bit of yellow as if the yellow is kind of reflecting onto all of my shapes. Maybe go along this bottom area too. So now our castle is nice and lit. The last thing we can do is add some stars. So I'm gonna rinse and dry my brush off, and I can get some solid white, and I can just tap that onto my canvas all over the sky for stars. Now, something important about stars is that you do some clumps, because if you just do the stars where it feels natural, you're probably gonna spread them out so much that it's gonna look like polka dots. So make sure you're tapping them different places, different sizes, and doing a few clumps of them. Okay. That is it. That is our Hogwarts painting. I hope you enjoyed. These brushes are reusable, so make sure you rinse them out and you wash your hands, all of that good stuff. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you join us again sometime soon.